I should emphasize that if this deal were to go through, it would be a major blow to the West, especially to the US, because it means that India would be committing itself to buying even more Russian arms for many years to come, which is something the US foreign policy establishment has been working to reduce for many years.
President Putin doesn't have too many friends on the world stage left, but Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is one of them. An advertising campaign throughout India has welcomed Vladimir Putin ahead of the signing of bilateral agreements between the two countries. What's apparent is that President Trump's lobbying effort for India to buy less Russian oil, well, it's really not working very well. So how has the trip gone and what next? Let's speak to Arjuna Keshvani-Ham, who's in India for the Sunday Times. Morning to you.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Morning.
we can hear you well. Talk to us about the ties between India and Russia. We saw a hug when President Putin arrived between him and Narendra Modi. Is this an economic relationship or is this an ideological relationship as well?
So, as you said, Chloe, Modi received Putin at the airport yesterday evening. Before the leaders headed out together in the same car, they shook hands, they hugged, they exchanged greetings. This was definitely a brotherly display of camaraderie. Modi has also gifted Putin a Russian translation of Bhagavad Gita, which is an ancient Hindu text that happened during a private dinner last night. So I think in Delhi, this is seen to mark the reaffirmation of a historic bilateral relationship, which, I mean, this does stretch from sort of Nehru, the first prime minister of India. He was a real socialist. Indira Gandhi, another prime minister, had a very close relationship to the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union always defended India on sensitive issues where the West often failed to do so, for example, in Kashmir and Bangladesh. But at the same time, this is also right now a relationship that's very much based in economics, very much based in realpolitik. And right now, India is really moving to sort of reassert what it calls its strategic autonomy. Many have observed that India has been trying to make a show, at least, of boosting ties with China and Russia in recent months after the US hit India with a 50% punitive tariff for its purchasing of Russian crude. And India may now also be trying to make amends with Putin. I mean, some have suggested that India has stopped purchasing Russian oil by around a third due to Trump's recent sanctions. And India may now be almost trying to compensate for that.
Right. So what's been achieved on this trip? Have they signed new deals? Is there a sense of a closer relationship as a result of this trip?
Sure. So thus far, Modi and Putin have finalized a $2 billion Russian submarine deal. This was a deal that was made after roughly a decade of talks, and India now expects to receive these vessels in 2028. But the most crucial part, again, of this deal is likely to be around arms purchases. So Moscow has for decades been India's top supplier of arms. 60% of defense equipment still comes from Russia, even though India has been making real efforts to reduce platform dependency. So aside from the sub deal, the two sides are likely to discuss new purchases of S-400s, the missile systems, which were reportedly quite helpful during the recent border conflict with Pakistan. And the Russian side has also confirmed, and this is quite important, that India will potentially be buying Su-57 fighter jets. But many in the sort of defense establishment have said that India is likely to be very wary about this because it's creating the potential for too much platform dependency on Russia at a time when India's been trying to reduce dependency. However, I should emphasize that if this deal were to go through, it would be a major blow to the West, especially to the US, because it means that India would be committing itself to buying even more Russian arms for many years to come, which is something the US foreign policy establishment has been working to reduce for many years.
Well, I just wonder what the Indian stance is on the war in Ukraine, because not just the government, but also the people in India. Do they just see this as something far away that they're not interested in? Do they back Russia? What's the view?
Sure. So I think in these talks, mentions of Ukraine will likely be limited to India's repeated calls for peace, which India has been making. I think in terms of the general attitude, people in India definitely are seen to support Russia on any of its foreign policy decisions a lot more than the rest of the globe. And as I said, a lot of this is due to this historical relationship between India and the Soviet Union, which is very historically very strong. But again, in terms of the Indian establishment, I think the position definitely is that they want Ukraine to come to an end. The question is whether India actually has enough leverage to impact Putin's decision making on this.
Really interesting. Thank you so much for talking to us. That is Arjuna Keshvani-Ham, who is in India for the Sunday Times, covering that meeting between Putin and Narendra Modi.
बिल्कुल, तो ये आप इस वक्त ये दृश्य देख रहे हैं काफी महत्वपूर्ण।
अनेक मीटिंगों में व्यस्त रहे हैं और बहुत सारे
очень много мероприятий, заседаний с своими коллегами из индийской стороны. И
विश्व का कल्याण शांति के मार्ग पर ही है। हम सबको मिलकर के शांति के रास्ते तलाशने चाहिए और पिछले दिनों जो प्रयास चल रहे हैं, मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि विश्व फिर से एक बार शांति की दिशा में लौटेगा।
Уважаемый господин президент,
И за вчерашний очень добрый вечер.
And for the yesterday's evening too was very good. And the actions we are taking together with some partners, including the United States, on a possible peace.
मैं समझता हूँ कि ये विश्वास बहुत बड़ी ताकत है।
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान नाणे रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ परा सकळ लोक मां सहुने वंदे निंदा न करे केनी रे पीड़ पराई जाने रे पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान नाणे रे वैष्णव जन